Hi, I'm Sandeep, and you're watching Weekender at 5. In today's headlines, 222 new community cases, COVID cases were reported today, with one more unfortunate death. The official said the death was of a patient at Auckland City Hospital. In the second major headline, calls have been made to increase the security of MPs in the parliament after Labour Party MP received a threat from anti vaxxers. Labour Party's whip, Kieran McCartney, has asked Parliamentary Service to review security for MPs, saying he was concerned about the escalation in anger over vaccinations and mandates. He said that he had received threats online after the clips were posted and would be talking to all MPs from all parties and parliamentary security about what steps could be taken to better ensure MPs' security. In the third major headline for today, Cabinet has been advised to consider moving the country into COVID protection framework earlier than the proposed 29th November announcement deadline date. As reported earlier, that Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has announced that the cabinet will be deciding on 29th of November on when to move Auckland out of current alert level 3 settings to the new proposed COVID protection framework. Today, it was revealed that the Ministry of Health Director General Dr. Ashley Bloomfield has pointed towards the fact that the current alert level system is allowing more interaction between the vaccinated and the unvaccinated population, thus possibly resulting in more COVID infections. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern said she strongly agreed with Dr. Bloomfield's view and had asked for further advice. In the last major headline, but not the least, for today, the news that is making headlines is about the polling numbers of major and minor political parties in the latest One News Colmar Brunton polls. In the polls, Labour Party has dropped 2 points marginally and is now trading at 41%. And the National has gained 2 points and is now selling at 28%. And the ACT Party remains unchanged on 14%. What is of more interest that there has been some dent in the popularity of Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, who has fallen 5 points to a current 39%, which is for the first time probably below 40%, as the preferred Prime Minister, while Nationals' Judith Collin is on 5%. And ACT Party leader David Seymour's preferred Prime Minister score is more than double of Judith Collins at 11%. So, to discuss on this more, we have got ACT Party leader David Seymour joining us directly from Wellington. So welcome to our virtual studio, David. How are you today?
Hey, I'm great, thanks, Sandeep, and thank you for having me on Weekend at 5.
Great. So, David, are you elated with the numbers that you have seen recently?
Look, it's a little bit like you're climbing a really big mountain, and we never believed we'd get this high this soon, but that doesn't mean there's not still a long way to go. ACT has doubled its polling this year. We have closed the gap between left and right, while National have stayed roughly the same. What we've done is we've increased the vote of the right overall, and the Labour and Greens, who used to be 25% ahead of the right, now that gap is only 6%. And I think if we keep closing the gap at this pace, then at some point in the first half of next year, ACT and National will actually be ahead of Labour and the Greens, and then we'll be having a real debate about changing the direction of New Zealand. For a long time
Sure.
now,
No,
it's
I'm
been
sensing a
very
great
stable.
camaraderie here.
Yeah.
David, I'm sensing a great camaraderie here with the National Party, and that is actually a remarkable change, I would say. So, otherwise, I was tempted to ask you that have you ever envisaged that ACT could become a major centre-right party in near future?
Well, I think that's certainly happening. If you look at where our polling's at, 14%, 16%, 17% are the last three public polls. Now, those polls, no third party has ever been that high. Even if you go back to Winston Peters or, before people figured him out, or Jim Anderton before the alliance kind of fell apart. Those other parties, no one's ever been as high as us. The ACT Party is closer than anyone's been to crossing over and getting consistently over 20%. And we may be seeing a serious rebalancing of New Zealand politics where people who want to make money, look after themselves and the people around them, take responsibility for their lives, actually have a voice and don't just get ignored as being sort of the fringe of national, but actually we're seeing New Zealand politics be it's about time, because a lot of the people that work hard and pay the bills just haven't had enough of a voice, even with national.
Sure. Now I will come back and talk more about how your relationship with national and how basically you both are envisaging to change the direction of New Zealand. But as you have rightly said that ACT Party is on track to create a new history. If the party can keep on getting the numbers that they are getting in the polls, after having created some kind of history in the last election, 2020, because probably in 2017 elections, ACT was polling at abysmally low at 0.5%. And from there to take the party to around 7.6% on election night in 2020, that was a great task, isn't it? So what I want to ask you today is get a clearer understanding what ACT Party stands for and what has contributed in ACT's rise in the recent years.
Well, first of all, if I could just share a bit of advice that a successful business person gave me once. They said, it's not how you go in the good times that matters. The best people, successful people, have to be able to come through the hard times. And we certainly did come through hard times with ACT, but we've stayed consistent to our brand. Who do we do our politics for? It's for people who want to work hard, save some money, invest carefully, and make the world for themselves and those around them a better place, rather than people who think that the government should try and engineer society for them. So, it's that basic idea of people who want to make a difference in their own lives and make a difference in the lives of people around them. And that requires freedom, it requires private property, the most important property rights so that you don't get attacked by criminals. It requires an education system that is focused on equipping the student for the 21st century rather than using kids as sort of a political project for the Ministry of Education. That's far too large. That's why we did charter schools, to give some people real choice. So that's our basic view. We're here for people who want to make a difference in their own life.
Sure, and that essentially means that what ACT Party strongly advocates is about minimal governance. So looking back in the last 3 years, where ACT Party has seen phenomenal growth in the polling numbers, those 3 years have been the period of some extraordinary events that our country has faced, be it Christchurch terror attack or be it this global pandemic. And from what people expect is that these are the time of some extended government support. So there is a bit of irony, like we are living in a time where they are looking towards maximal governments, but here we have got your party, ACT Party, which is always advocating for a minimal governments, still gaining a popularity among people. So how do you comprehend that and how do you explain that?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I think, in times of crisis, government generally gets larger. The two biggest growth of government in the previous century were World War I and World War II. So usually if government's getting bigger, something bad is going on. And you're right that, through the pandemic, people give government much more money and power than they normally would. But equally, a lot of people are rightly worried about that. And they ask, well, who is standing up for the rights of the individual people, for personal freedom, for private property? And that's a role that ACT really relishes, because we know that if a person doesn't invest in a business, then there won't be any jobs. And if you don't have a lot of people investing in businesses, then you won't get competition for employees and you won't get rising wages. So, because we're in favor of freedom and because we understand very intimately how individual freedom works with the role of government, I think we've been in a really good position to critique the government's COVID response in a really constructive way, not only say what they're doing wrong, but say what they could be doing better. Classic example is why can't we have rapid antigen testing right now? You can buy them on the shelf in Sydney, but they're illegal in New Zealand.
Sure. Well, that's interesting. Actually, even I'm tempted to keep on talking about more about COVID, but I have an interesting. I just trying to have a different take on how we want to talk about politics, because in the last 18 months, probably all our political conversation they have been emphasized much on COVID, and I think many other important issues they are being left in the back bencher. So, what is your experience when you are going and talking to your electorate and people? What kind of conversation ACT Party is having right now? Is it all about COVID and how to respond to COVID, or you're talking about some other issues as well?
Well, COVID is certainly the number one issue for a lot of people because they've been so badly affected. But the conversation pretty quickly changes to some other issues. So people are very concerned about the amount of debt that has been built up by government in managing COVID. So they say they've done a good job, and in some ways the government has done a good job, but it's only been possible with huge amounts of borrowing, and people worry about what that means. That borrowing for now is on low interest rates because we've printed a lot of money. But people are starting to worry about inflation and prices going up. And they're worried about the cost of living. People see it when they fill up with petrol. They see it when they buy vegetables at the supermarket. They see it in their rent and their mortgage. You know, the government printing money has put pressure on everything else. So cost of living becomes a major issue. And then there's this question of, well, how's the government going at some of its bigger challenges? For example, how is the government going when it comes to reducing carbon emissions? They said that this is going to be the nuclear-free moment. We're going to battle climate change, but New Zealand's emissions have actually gone up since Jacinda's been in power. Well, what about
Sure.
solving the housing problem? You know, the houses have got 70% more expensive in 4 years. So people also started to talk about what happens after COVID as well.
No, surely, and I will come back and talk more about that a bit later. But just going back to COVID response and where you share the credit to the government, what I'm keen to ask is that how an ACT Party government would have acted differently in terms of COVID management. What your party would have done differently in terms of borrowing and responding.
So just starting with the beginning, I think the government basically did the right thing initially. We're an island nation. Our big advantage is our isolation. The lockdown allowed us to have a long summer with no COVID, and that was very good. We eradicated COVID several times with the help of lockdowns. But so that part, you know, they probably had right. But what the government got wrong, in our view, is they didn't accept that COVID was always going to get here eventually. We couldn't keep it away forever. And eventually, everybody in New Zealand is going to get it. It's going to be endemic. The problem is, how prepared are we? Because the more ready we are, the less money we have to borrow, the quicker we can get there, and the faster we can actually save people's lives. So we can reduce all the costs of COVID if we were prepared. So if you look at the kinds of things that we were saying as early as March, they're doing a business travel network now to experiment with skipping MIQ. They should have been doing that experiment in March. That's when we proposed it. That's when Singapore was already doing it. They should have ordered the vaccines faster. They should have partnered with GPs. They should have had the vaccine, diaries or certificates ready to go when they got the vaccines ready. There's just a whole lot of things they didn't do in time. And because they didn't do things, they sadly, have left all of us behind. And we're just now paying, $1 billion extra a week while waiting for the government to get organised. So that's how we would have been more proactive about facing reality rather than taking a big nap.
That's quite a fair criticism of the government, I understand. And probably I think there is a realization within the government as well, and they are trying to get their act together. So now coming to the opening of Auckland and moving to this COVID protection regime. I think probably government is changing their plans every day. So where does ACT Party stands on that in terms of the Freedom Day that, as we are hearing more often in the media, that when do you propose that Auckland should be opened or New Zealand should be moved to the new COVID protection regime?
Well, I think first of all, December 1 should be Freedom Day, and I think December 1 will be Freedom Day. I think the government will announce on the 29th of November that the next day at midnight we are moving to the traffic light system. Of course, the next day will be the 30th at midnight. That will be the start of December 1. So I think we've probably won that argument and forced the government to have a Freedom Day. Next question is, what does that look like? So moving to the traffic light system, probably traffic light red in Auckland, orange in the rest of the country. The difficult areas will be places like Northland. If Northland can't move to the traffic light system because of low vaccination rates, then the question will be, what do we do about Northland? Do we have Northland closed off with those low vaccination rates? Or do we say, look, everyone can go to Northland, that's fine. At this point, I don't think it's entirely clear what that policy should be. But I think that we are going to have to make a call on Northland and probably Tairāwhiti, two very low vaccination, vulnerable remote areas.
Sure. Now, I will come back and we will talk a little bit more about the numbers that we have seen in this latest polls. So, when we see Ek Party was probably plateaued, I don't know if you agree with that word. But is it fair to say that Ek Party has plateaued at 14%, or do you envisage rise of Ek Party and David Seymour in the near future as well?
Well, if you look at the last year, we've had a few periods where we've gone flat and then we've risen, and then we've gone flat and then we've risen. So, it's certainly true that our polling's been about the same for the last month or maybe 6 weeks. We've been at, probably actually about 2 months, we've been at between 14 and 17%. But those are record levels. We've never been that high before. We stopped around about 10% about 6 months ago. We sort of flattened there as well. And then we went up and then we flattened. And I suspect we'll go up again.
Sure. Now, the next question is quite going to be an interesting one, that if I have to ask you that, why Ek Party has risen and how you have benefited. So I will stop short of saying that Ek Party has benefited from the woos in your, I would say, the center-right companion National Party. The reason being that I have read your opinion piece that you wrote for Spin-Off the other day, where you have said that it is more like a lazy assessment. So I would like to ask you once again, and just to benefit of audiences for Indian Weekender, that what in your view has prompted the rise of Ek Party in last 1.5 years?
I think it's just that we've taken a very old-fashioned, honest approach to politics. So, we believe it's a politician's job to make sure that New Zealand has the best public policy in the world. We're in the business of representation. We represent New Zealanders who believe in personal freedom, and we raise the standard of lawmaking by holding the government accountable and proposing better solutions. And we're always focused on voters' concerns and aspirations, not other politicians. Now, I'm just reading that off my desk there. Every ACT MP has the same commitment and the same plan at their desk. So, we've been committed to listening, proposing better ideas, playing the ball, not the man or woman for that matter. And I think that people over time have started to see that we're really here to serve them and make their lives better with better policies. Whereas the other guys, they tend to get pretty tied up in themselves and each other, and that's not very attractive to voters.
Sure. Now, reading that same piece, I figured out that you have analyzed, and your party have come to conclusion that the rise in Ek Party votes from 2017 to 2020 elections, that rise was quite balanced and well distributed throughout the country. Probably you have seen an increase in ACT share of votes in every segment of voters, be it European, Maori, Pakeha, Chinese. But interestingly, you have come to conclusion that the only segment of population, of Kiwi population, where Ek Party has themselves identified that they haven't done well is the Pacific community and the Kiwi Indian community. So that brings me to the last question, that have you been able to identify that what more you need to do to gain traction within the Indian community?
Yeah, it was interesting. We analysed the Kiwi Indian community, and we didn't feel that we had a lot of problems, that there was nothing that was sort of fundamentally wrong about our beliefs or that people would disagree with, but there was a real lack of familiarity. And it's that old case of people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And so, our job, I think, and that's why I've been very happy to appear with the Indian Weekender anytime, is to actually reach out and say to the Kiwis of Indian origin, look, the ACT Party believes in business. We believe in public safety. We believe that immigration makes New Zealand a wealthier and better place in every way. We think that we're a party that could be a good representative, not for all the Kiwis of Indian origin. Obviously, there's a variety of views, but there must be a pretty significant proportion of people in the Kiwi Indian community who have that same basic set of values that we do. And we're really keen to encourage people, if they feel that way, to just think about making ACT their party, because we could probably give them, representation that's more suitable to their views than perhaps other parties could.
Sure. And one last question, like in terms of the steps and the strategy that you have said about connecting with the Indian community, what kind of messages or sentiments have you been hearing, or your colleagues from the caucus have been hearing? What are the three major issues that affects Kiwi Indian community as of today?
Well, obviously, a lot of people in the Kiwi Indian community have immigrated themselves or have relatives who are migrants or still back in India. And what's happened at the border recently has been absolutely horrific. It's barbaric. There's no need for MIQ right now. It should be eliminated. People should be able to isolate at home. You're allowed to isolate at home if you do have COVID, but if you have a negative test, you have to go through MIQ. It's just crazy. So we're completely opposed to MIQ, and we think it's time to start sorting the immigration system. Of course, this new fast-track residency has been quite welcome, but still includes people offshore and in education, and we think that's a shame. And that's part of the fact we're generally pro-immigrant. So look, that's probably the biggest sort of single issue that is hot in the Kiwi of Indian origin community. But the other issues are issues that a lot of people share. People very worried about the cost of living. They see costs being put on, especially people in business. They see the government's putting on costs everywhere. And the final thing is just the level of crime. In fact, I've just remembered somebody I've got to ring. She's a software engineer. She also runs a convenience store with her partner. And they've been robbed several times. And this basic issue of safe streets, especially in the middle of all this madness, the Labour Party's big priority is to repeal 3 strikes and give an early Christmas present to the worst criminals. So, look, what we've found is, people are worried about, the idea of being able to cross the border, reunite with family, the cost of living and the prices people keep putting on, especially on business, and then just being safe. And this government, unfortunately, that they're sort of more worried about the criminals' welfare than the victims' welfare, and that really annoys people.
Sure. Thanks very much, David. From what I'm hearing, that you have got a very good understanding of the problems and issues that is affecting Kiwi Indian community. And the other side of this understanding is that there will be huge expectations. So probably, yep, let's keep our fingers crossed, and we will like to continue this conversation and see how ACT Party can do or represent Kiwi Indian community and address their issues in a much better way in the near future. So thanks for joining us and sharing your thoughts and views, and we will continue to have this conversation later.
Oh, great, Sandeep. You have a great afternoon.
Thank you. So this is Sandeep at Weekender at 5. Thanks for watching us. And yes, keep us following us on our social media platforms to get to know what's happening latest in the news in New Zealand and around the world. Thank you.